Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We're learning Mishnah Beitza, Parakeh, chapter 5, Mishnah Beis, Mishnah 2. And today's learning is dedicated in memory of
Chayasora Bas Shraga Faivo.
Chayasar Bashraga Faivo, sponsored by Barry Steinberg. I heard Neshama Shaban Aliyah.
Amen.
Okay. So the first part of the Mishnah starts off with a rule, and then the details will follow. Kol shechayav alav mishum shvus. Any activity that we're obligated to refrain from because of shavus. Shavus means the rabbis restricted it, but what it means specifically is where they restricted a ordinary activity. An ordinary activity that has no connection to any kind of mitzvah, no connection to any kind of obligation. It's an ordinary activity. Still, the sages said you can't do it for whatever reasons they may have had. Mishum rishus, or let's say it's something that's rishus. That means, what that means in translation right now is it's an optional mitzvah. An optional mitzvah means sometimes it has to be done, sometimes it doesn't. And so, but you could have those that were also forbidden by the sages. Mishum mitzvah b'Shabbos, or it is actually a mitzvah. That means it's unconditional. It's something that we have to do, nonetheless. Or the word I think they have here is rishus is an optional mitzvah, and mishum mitzvah means an unconditional mitzvah, as we will explain. And still, it is subject to a rabbinic prohibition b'Shabbos. Okay, that is b'Shabbos. It was. I'm sorry. I have to read it this way. B'Shabbos, the sages restricted it on Shabbos. Chayav and Allah b'Yom Tov were also restricted from it on Yom Tov, meaning something that they said not to do on Shabbos. In any of the three categories, we may not do it on Yom Tov either. These are the ordinary activities that the sages forbade. Lo oilan be'ilan, you cannot go up on a tree, right? Any mitzvah going up on a tree? No, right? No mitzvah going up on a tree. No situation where there's some kind of mitzvah involved. It's typically going up on a tree. Is going up on a tree. It's an act. However, the sages forbade it on Shabbos because we're afraid if you go up on the tree, you may pull up a branch. Okay. We may not ride on an animal. Why? Because you may tear off a branch, use it as a whip. No swimming on Shabbos. Why? Because one might build a raft. Typically, or often people were swimming those days. They have to get over to cross the river, right? So if we allow that kind of crossing over the river, you may come to actually build something to get yourself across, or to help you swim over at least. We may not clap hands, slap thighs, or dance. Doing any of these things in a musical way is forbidden to do because often these things were accompanied by music, and we are afraid you might come to actually repair a musical instrument on Shabbos. So, without getting specifically into the fact that we find people who clap on Shabbos nowadays, that's a separate discussion. But there is a halacha that says that these kinds of things may not be done on Shabbos. Again, all rabbinic restrictions, things that are all basically ordinary activities. Still, the sages forbade it. These are the examples that we called rishus. And they are, as they call them, optional mitzvahs. Loy dunin. We may not make judgments. We may not declare. Right. We may not judge a court case. V'loy mekatchin. You can't make kedushin on Shabbos, right? You want to marry a woman. The first stage of marriage is you give her a ring before you take her to the chuppah. And in the times of the Mishnah, they used to make the kedushin almost a year, but it could be a year before the actual chuppah. So you want to make kedushin on a woman on Shabbos? Not on Shabbos. V'loy cholzin, v'loy miyabmin. A situation where a person dies without children, and there is a mitzvah for the brother to marry his sister-in-law. or if he doesn't want to give her chalitza, neither of those things can be done on Shabbos. Why is that? That's because typically all these things came along with some kind of a written document or contract, a record, a document, and since all these things typically came along with writing, so therefore, I mean, even if you didn't make the kedushin, you married her with a ring, but there was a document that it was done, and therefore that was typically how it was done, and therefore we don't allow any of these activities on Shabbos, and as Mishna says, nor on Yontif. Now, what's interesting is that right. So these are the examples of reshus, optional mitzvahs, right? You know, a person has to do yibam if it comes up that way, right? A judgment, if there's a necessity to make a judgment. Kedushin, you want to marry a woman, right? These are the things that are called reshus, optional mitzvahs, okay? And these are going to basically be things where basically it's going to be kind of like we say, it's optional. It's something that could that can, you know, sometimes come around, sometimes not. And then the third example is going to be the example of the Elohim Mishum mitzvah. These are the things that are a mitzvah, okay? Loi makdishin. You cannot sanctify something to the Beis HaMikdash. V'loi marichin. Marichin means there's a certain type of a vow the Torah says called erech, that when you that it's actually a set amount of value per the age of the person. There's a certain age range that if you say erech, this person upon me, this person's value upon me, so depending on their age or their age range, the Torah gives a set amount to that. So we say you can't do that. Chayrim is also a form of sanctifying something, that if you actually go ahead, if a person says that an object is chayrim, which means set apart, doesn't mean excommunication here, it means set apart, it becomes a property of the Beis HaMikdash. If he says chayrim to the Kohanim, it becomes property of the Kohanim. All these things, we call them mitzvah, they are unconditional mitzvahs, but they are still subject to rabbinic prohibition because of the fact that in these cases, they resemble business. You're transferring ownership. They resemble business, and therefore these were included in the prohibition about of doing mitzvahs. Give me 1 second, please. Okay. The when we say unconditional mitzvah in the case of the third category, the way that's explained here is this is a mitzvah that applies equally in all situations. You know, the second group were things that, depending on the situation, the mitzvah comes. Here, it's not about depending on a situation. It's basically, it applies equally in all situations. All right. So now, these were the three examples of the rabbinic prohibitions regarding the three categories. And we say, Kol Eila b'Yom Tov Amru, Kal v'Chomer b'Shabbos. All these prohibitions were stated in connection to Yontif, and they certainly apply to Shabbos. Ein ben Yontif l'Shabbos, elo eichel nefesh bovad. At the end, the Mishnah concludes by saying that, let me just back up for a second. The part of the Mishnah that said all these things that were said on Yontif, or for sure for Shabbos, refers to situations or rabbinic prohibitions that they said regarding Yontif. That's how they stated it. But it applies for Shabbos too, typically. Now we'll see, we'll get into that a little bit more. And then when it says, Ein ben Yom Tov l'Shabbos elo eichel nefesh bovad, at the end the mission concludes, the only difference between Yom Tov and Shabbos are eichel nefesh, fruit preparation. Fruit preparation is allowed on Yom Tov, not allowed on Shabbos. Otherwise, the mission is implying that whatever you have on Shabbos, you can have on Yom Tov, and vice versa. So now, they bring down here the following. The Torah permits doing certain malachas, kneading, baking on Yom Tov, and prepare food that will be eaten that day. Now, we previously had an argument between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel argue as to whether these food preparation malachas may be done for other purposes as well, right? You're allowed to make a fire for cooking. Can you make a fire for other purposes? You're allowed to carry for the purposes of getting food over somewhere. Can you carry for other purposes? So Beis Shammai said no, it's only about food preparation. And according to Beis Hillel, it's once a malacha, once a form of activity is permitted for food preparation, you can use it for other purposes also. All right. Now, by the fact that the Mishnah here states the only difference between Yontif and Shabbos is Eichel Nefesh, is fruit preparation, that would imply that it was not fruit preparation. You can't do it on Yontif either. So that would mean that our Mishnah is following Beis Shammai. That can happen. The Mishnah is following the opinion of Beis Shammai, because if it was following Beis Hillel, right, it wouldn't just be Eichel Nefesh, it would be Eichel Nefesh plus anything else that would be the same halacha that you would do for food preparation. You can do it for other purposes also. The Mishnah doesn't say that, and therefore the Mishnah was following the opinion of Beis Shammai, again, in this part. And then another thing that's pointed out here by the Bartanura, brought down in the notes, our Mishnah indicates that with the exception of food preparation, any activity permitted on Yontiv is permitted on Shabbos as well. Right? Our Mishnah indicates, with the exception of food preparation, any activity permitted on Yontiv is permitted on Shabbos as well. What?
Permitted, not prohibited.
Yeah. It should be the other way.
It should be the other way.
Yeah.
Our Mishnah indicates that with the exception of preparation activity, no.
Yeah.
No, it should be, it's a
They
mistake.
must-
Right? Let's see the rest of the sentence. It must disagree with the previous Mishnah, which allowed throwing produce through a skylight only on Yontif and not on Shabbos. All right, that works.
Mhm.
Right? Meaning if it's supposed to be that everything is forbidden on both, besides for fruit preparation,
Yeah.
then throwing the fruit through the skylight, right, is not direct fruit preparation. That's a preliminary to fruit preparation.
Yeah.
And we said you can do it on Yontif, you can't do it on Shabbos. So that also doesn't follow what the Mishnah's rule here is.
Yeah.
So that's a clear typo here.
Yeah.
The point is that the Mishnah
Pretty
implies
big type.
that the only difference between them is Eichel Nefesh, otherwise they'd be the same. And we had before a difference between Shabbos and Yontif regarding throwing those fruits through the skylight. So therefore, it comes out that this Mishnah apparently disagrees with that previous Mishnah and would say you can't throw it on Shabbos or on Yontif. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Oh, so we had
Yeah.
a guest